It's a bitterly disappointing way for the defending champion to have to exit here in Shanghai this year.
He could barely stand, but he still won. Jannik Sinner's shocking Rome meltdown and the history waiting on the other side.
Shaking. Tremors. Yeah, this is really worrying. He's got the ice towel that he's holding on to, but he can barely hang on to it. His right hand is...
He won. He always wins. But this time, nobody was celebrating the way they normally do. Because what the cameras caught after the final point was not the sight of a champion raising his fist to the Rome sky.
I don't play, for records. I play just for my own story, and obviously, in the same time, it means a lot to me. But tomorrow is another day, another opponent, a different opponent. For me, the highest priority is trying to recover as much as I can.
It was the sight of a man who looked like he might genuinely collapse if he took one more step. The world #1, the most dominant force in men's tennis right now, the player who has been making the sport look almost embarrassingly easy for months, stood on the Foro Italico clay and bent over like someone had quietly stolen the last of his energy and walked off with it. And the entire tennis world held its breath. Because in that moment, Jannik Sinner did not look like the untouchable machine everyone has been watching steamroll tournaments across the globe. He looked exhausted, human, and suddenly vulnerable in a way that nobody had seen coming. And now, with the biggest match of his season just around the corner, one enormous question hangs over everything. Is the world #1 finally running out of road? Let us start at the very beginning, because to understand how dramatic this moment truly is, you need to understand what Jannik Sinner has been doing to the rest of the tennis world since late 2025. The word dominance barely covers it. This young Italian has not just been winning tournaments, he has been systematically dismantling the entire ATP Tour, with a level of consistency that has left experienced analysts reaching back through decades of tennis history, trying to find comparisons. Before arriving in Rome, he had already claimed titles in Paris, Indian Wells, Miami, Monte Carlo, and Madrid. 5 consecutive Masters 1,000 titles in a row. To put that in perspective for you, no player in history had ever done that before. Not Roger Federer during his prime, not Rafael Nadal on his beloved clay, not Novak Djokovic at the absolute peak of his powers. Only Jannik Sinner. At 24 years old, in the same season, the numbers behind the streak are almost too clean to be real. He won 37 consecutive sets during one stretch. He had lost just 2 sets across his last 27 Masters victories heading into Rome. He was a one-man wrecking crew moving through the draw week after week, picking up trophies like they were items on a grocery list. Then came Rome. And Rome, as it turns out, had something to say about all of that. The Italian Open began the same way every other tournament has begun for Sinner this year. He moved through the early rounds with the kind of efficient, suffocating tennis that makes opponents look like they are playing a completely different sport. Sebastian Ofner, Alexei Popyrin, Andrea Pellegrino. Names dispatched cleanly, no sets dropped, no real drama. The machine was running exactly as expected. And then the quarterfinal against Andrei Rublev arrived. And while Sinner still won, something shifted. Sinner took the first set 6-2 and built a commanding lead in the second, but then Rublev broke back late, and for the first time all tournament, Sinner looked physically uncomfortable. ESPN, his first serve percentage dipped. His movement became heavier. Cameras caught him reaching for his right thigh during a changeover, that familiar worrying spot that has concerned his team before. He still won. He always finds a way to win. But the warning signs were written so clearly on his body that even the most casual observer could read them. What happened after the Rublev match, though, that was something else entirely. During his courtside interview, Sinner could barely disguise the toll the match had taken. Instead of standing comfortably beside the interviewer the way players usually do, he leaned heavily against the wall behind him, just to keep himself upright. The interviewer noticed immediately, pointed it out, and mercifully kept the exchange short. And then, when Sinner turned away from the cameras to walk off, he bent over and grabbed his legs. Just for a moment. Just long enough for the cameras to catch it and for the image to spread everywhere within minutes. For the millions of people who have watched him tear through tournament after tournament, looking completely fresh after every victory, it was a genuinely startling sight. Now here is where the story gets even more intense. Because the right thigh issue is not new. A trainer was called to treat Sinner's right thigh midway through the semifinal against Medvedev, the same area that forced him to retire mid-match in Shanghai back in 2025. ESPN. In that Shanghai match, the cramps in the same leg were severe enough that a physio had to help him back to his chair. He could barely walk. The conditions were brutal, the humidity suffocating, and what looked like a routine match turned into a medical emergency that ended his campaign on the spot. Now, months later, the same leg is being flagged again, in a different city, under different circumstances, but with identical alarm bells ringing for the people watching closely enough to hear them. And then came the semifinal against Daniil Medvedev, and what a semifinal it was. Because just when you thought this story could not get more dramatic, Rome decided to add a thunderstorm. Sinner and Medvedev's semifinal was halted by rain during the deciding set, with Sinner leading 4-2. The match suspended late on Friday evening after worsening court conditions made play impossible. Outlook India, a tense exchange between Sinner and the chair umpire over slippery conditions, preceded the suspension, which was called around 9:45 p.m. local time. Outlook India. So there was the world number one, already clearly running on empty, forced to try and sleep through the night, knowing he had to come back the next morning and close out a match against one of the most dangerous players on the planet, with a leg that had already been worked on by a trainer, on a body that had given more than any body reasonably should in a single season. Sinner admitted afterward that sleeping through the suspension was not easy. He was in the third set, nearly finished, but knowing he still had to show up again and that anything could happen when play resumed brought the nerves back like it was the start of a brand new match. TSN, that is the detail that really gets under your skin when you think about it. We talk about physical exhaustion in tennis all the time, but the mental exhaustion of a rain suspension like that is almost impossible to fully appreciate from the outside. You have to wind back down from the intensity of match mode, try to rest a body that is flooded with adrenaline, convince your mind to switch off when everything inside it is still spinning, and then wake up and reboot everything from scratch, while your opponent has had exactly the same amount of time to recover and is now coming at you completely refreshed. It is a uniquely brutal challenge.
What's a bitterly disappointing way for the defending champion to have to exit here in Shanghai this year.